come over to Berlin if you can and be a guest and film it. And he said, yeah, sure. He heard about LeviAmp already before, so he was happy to come, and I was very happy that he actually did.
How did he first hear about it?
I don't know, actually. We didn't talk about that, where he heard it. But I mean, I did some Twitter, and we also were featured in some articles here and there. So it's we're a small company. It's hard to find us, but it's not impossible. So I guess he just heard about us on the internet. And I think one of the earliest times when Easy Charge was featured quite a bit, it was when I did the concept art of Model 3 when Elon Musk just announced it, but nobody knew how it will look like. So I've made several pictures of how I thought the Model 3 will look like. And then I put in those pictures our LeviAmp, and that got picked up by some news, and then by another news, and it went really a bit viral. But so I guess that's where he maybe saw us.
Very good marketing. You have a head for marketing, yes.
But that's right. I mean, when you're a startup, you have to do everything what is possible to,
for sure.
and within the budget to advertise. So, yeah, in principle, that was really great, and I mean, Robert is great, and we had
so
a lot of fun filming it.
Everybody should watch the video, but just and go to your website easycharge.me. But basically, I mean, you have a charging solution that doesn't go into the wall on the sides, which is what you think of when you think of a charging station, of course, something next to the car, but actually goes on the roof, which makes it even more out of the way and very out of the way, and then you just can pull a little thing to pull the charging cord down. Very convenient looking, very easy looking, and plug it into your car. But it also features some very cool things, such as a camera that can watch your car, so you can know if somebody messed with your car or is messing with it, and this projector, so you can actually project EV charging station on the spot in a way that I think would be much more difficult for someone to accidentally park a gas car in such a spot, because
we all hope so, because that happens. That still happens.
Accidentally. There's definitely the people who are ice on purpose and the ones who do it on mistake. But it should make it very clear, this is very obvious, this is an EV charging spot. Easier to find. One of my big problems with EV charging stations is they're often like hidden, hard to find, and I think if it's projected very clearly, that's great. And like you said, you can advertise on that spot, put advertisements there. A hotel or something can. You can project someone's name there, so they feel very exclusive. Spot from Mr. Field coming, who's coming today. So great feature. What are your challenges with getting it rolled out into parking garages around Europe, around the world? What's the biggest?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about garages in principle, and what definitely strikes me a lot when we talk to many companies and parking operators, and there are lots of newly built houses, newly built garages in principle. We still see a problem that they don't even think they build a house which will stand here for another 80, 100 years, or I don't know, whatever, 50, 80 years. And they don't even bother to think what will come in the next 20 years, whether the electric mobility will come. And not that they don't put charging station there, I can understand that, but they don't prepare even the cables and the
wiring,
the wiring, and the enough amount of kilowatts going into the house to serve charging stations later on. So what we have to do sometimes is that, if the garage is built and we come there and we see that there is only available of, I don't know, 50 kilowatts available of power for charging, which is nothing, we have to implement, the load management, which luckily we can. And then if there is, more cars charging at the same time, then the charging stations will just decide who is getting which car, and not to exceed the 50 kilowatts. So I'm seeing a lot of things like that. So that's one hurdle. But I think some companies who are building buildings, they're thinking about that, but they are still in minority, not in majority. So that's one thing which definitely makes it more complicated.
So are you targeting developers who are developing nice new
I mean, we are even talking to architects because they are also they are one of the biggest fans of our solution because it looks nice. It gets better into the environment of the garage and things like that. But in principle, I think that's the number one challenge. The number two challenge, which we hear, is absolutely business model. So if they buy chargers, at least parking operators, they just want to make money on that somehow. And it's very difficult right now. It's close to impossible to make money, and many companies who are putting their charging stations and getting those backend systems and charging people money for charging, they are in majority of time they're not making money on that, and they are actually investing into the future.
No. I mean, every charging network you can think of is basically still invest into the future phase,
Exactly.
not really making money on it. But the thing that comes to mind for me is, so in a city, a parking space is worth a lot. You have to pay a lot of money for a parking space in a garage, right. Even if you're not like in the middle of a city. I mean, we're sort of more on the edge of our city, and we still the price of the parking space is not negligible. And but if you have someone who wants to go electric, they're going to put a premium on having being able to put a charging station or having a charging station in. So it seems like developers could learn that if they have like 10 spots with charging stations, they could attract people who want to have a Tesla at their home, or a BMW i3, or even a Nissan Leaf or Renault Zoe, and could sell those spots with charging stations for a premium that they make money on. But aside from that, you're saying basically you just want them to have the wiring in place so that the consumer can put the charging station if they choose.
At least when they build, they should prepare for the next 50 years. And it's easier to put appropriate wiring when they build stuff than to do it later on, because it's super expensive to kind of rewire the whole thing and to put new current there. But in principle, I think there will be, even if they don't do it right now, they will be pushed and they will have no choice. If we look 5 years ahead, and as you said, Model 3 and Nissan Leaf second generation, people will start driving those cars. People will start asking those questions, facility management of the building, and they'll quickly realize that they need to find an answer to that. Otherwise, people will be just choosing other apartments to live in, right? So there's also competition in that respect among offices, among buildings where people live. So I think the market will rule it anyhow. That's just my opinion. Sooner or later, and I would say within the next 1.5 years, they will start feeling that effect of electric cars getting viral, kind of.
Yeah, well, I have questions about other stuff, but Kyle, you have some questions or comments on this topic?
Yeah, I was just thinking with we were talking about the electric charging models and how to make money on that, how to profit from EV charging, and I think, like you said, I mean, we're in a state of evolution today where we've gone from level 1 charging, level 2 charging. Now we're seeing more DC fast charging stations, and I think the future we're looking for is at least 150 kilowatt speeds. So we still haven't really achieved that charging network that is ready for mass adoption yet. And then on the vehicle side, we're seeing a similar evolution, with the vehicles continuing to increase in speed. And so I think the market will dictate what the charging needs are, but that market hasn't really fully defined itself yet because it's evolving so quickly. And so the challenge is really saying, when is the market going to stabilize, and when in parallel will the infrastructure need to rise up to meet that market? So I think supercharging, or like 150 kilowatt minimum speed charging in public, is one of those kind of leveling areas where we'll see the market kind of stabilize. And then with EVs, the 200 plus mile EV will be another level like that. And the variable that's out there for me is autonomous driving. So we don't know how that's going to impact or when that's going to impact consumer behavior. And so I think those are the three kind of variables that we're looking at there, that I see.
And so I think you're saying too. So I mean, assuming people have cars, so they don't just use Tesla network or Uber Electric or something. I mean, we don't know what percentage of consumers should or will or whatever have home charging at all. Like, you know, right now we're working on this sort of assumption of 100% of them would be ideal, right? But maybe it doesn't really matter. Maybe it only needs to be 50% of them or something. Is there a sort of, I mean, of course, we don't know all the market data, but is there a certain percentage split that you think it's home charging is going to end up being for? 50%, 75%?
I think it's going to be very different in cities. So I think in cities we'll see a lot lower vehicle ownership because parking spots are at a premium. And so I think in cities we'll see a faster adoption of those ride sharing services and the autonomous driving solutions coming about. If you look at where Uber is being used, it's highly utilized in cities, whereas in rural environments it's not as effective and not as cost effective, and there just aren't as many drivers. So I think the adoption splits will be heavily biased towards cities. And similarly with EV charging, I would expect that trend to be similarly reflected, where we'll have a greater need for massive charging stations just outside cities, but not so much in the cities. In the future, I think the challenge is identifying when that tipping point will happen, because we're in a hybrid mode and we'll continue to be in kind of that hybrid mode for many, many years here.
Yeah, I mean, we just had several days ago. I'm trying to find that quite an interesting discussion on Twitter about that. How many, what will be the pie about the home charging and public charging and charging in company, for example, where you work. I think in principle, home charging won't be as big as we anticipate. I think many charging will happen at work. So the companies will provide that as a benefit for their employees. Public charging on street, I think will be an important part of the equation, but won't be as big as we all think it will be, because just because of the behavior. And even if we don't take autonomous into equation, but if we take autonomous into equation, we are actually at EasyCharge thinking really hard about that, because what will happen if cars will be parking themselves in the garages without people?
It's funny that we keep saying if we don't take autonomous into account. Because,
we have to.
But then if you think really, if you're thinking about it and planning, you have to take it into account, right? So we have this friction against assuming it, but it seems very likely. But Kyle, you said it'll be different for cities versus suburbs or something. But it's also going to vary tremendously from city to city. So San Francisco is going to have a different approach than New York. Martin is a attendee here. He lives in Amsterdam, and Amsterdam has this great program of one thing I was going to bring up, which is if a resident of Amsterdam just has to ask for a charging station on their street, and then within like a month or two they put one in, and then you have a charging station there. When I was in Amsterdam, not last time, but a couple years ago, you would see pockets of electric cars in different parts of the city because there would be charging stations in those areas. So you'd have one or two charging stations, and you'd see, oh, there's one. They'd be all around this charge. And I don't know how convenient. I mean, I interviewed one Volkswagen Golf GTE owner there, and he just didn't seem to indicate any inconvenience with this system. It seems like it's fairly easy to it's implementing quite well. They are charged hourly still for parking on the street some places, but if you plug in for the night, there's like a nighttime period where you don't get charged, but so you don't have to like come out at 1 a.m. to move your car or something. But these are the weird things that start to pop up as you go into it. But yeah, next on my list was workplace charging. I mean, it seems like your solution, this garage-focused solution, would be really good for workplace charging. And if people have workplace charging, it's hard to imagine that they really need home charging in many instances if they have workplace and a decent network. I mean,
right. And I mean, many people have to realize that having a car like Model 3 or Model S, which I think having a range of 300 kilometers or 400 kilometers, you don't need to charge every day, right? That's what the perception of people is. Of non-EV drivers, let's say, it's I have to charge all the time. I have to plug in like a mobile phone every day or whatever. You don't need to. You charge once for 3-4 hours. If we're talking about AC 22 kilowatts. then you are fully charged, and then you can drive a week normally in the city, or even more on one charge. So
yeah, and again, like our lives, how it changed. I think people are bringing over their experience with, like you said, with their phones and computers, and expecting like a daily need to charge.
Which is absolutely not true. I mean, I'm not charging every day. I don't care, and I think many people as well. So yeah, if you have a free charger, you'll plug in, but you don't need to search for that charger. You don't need to worry about that. That's, I think, the most important thing to realize for many people.
Yeah.
And I think work charging will be important because companies are having the ability to give that benefit to their employees, and for companies it will be easier to facilitate the kind of big amount of charging stations at their garages rather than in the residential buildings, because there you kind of have to deal with every spot owner and every building owner separately, which makes it more complicated. And in some cases, it's in Germany close to impossible to agree on those things because, you know, they don't want you to touch anything in their garage and things like that. So
yeah, I'm sure. No, this is, I mean, not just Germany, this is everywhere. I mean, this is condo associations, apartment building. It's a difficult challenge no matter where you are, I think.
Exactly. And that's why, you know, when we designed, when I get the idea of Leviamp, I said, okay, I wanted to design the charger to make it as simple as possible to install in those residential buildings. Like, that's why we have this old school window for metering to show you the values for electrician if you'd like to, you know, like, I mean, of course you can read it electronically. You can read it.
This is something that shocked. I had no idea initially. I don't think it was mentioned in the fully charged video, was it? But
I think we talked about that. I'm not sure if it's in the video, but we definitely talked about it. I mean, those things.
You have in the Leviamp charging system, you have a meter as well.
Yes.
So if you're building a garage, you know, a building owner is concerned about you stealing electricity, or, you know, of course, condo association, whatever, you can tell them, you know, there's a meter in the question you end up with still with some people is going to be, well, is it accurate? Like,
it's MID conform meter, so I mean,
of course, but you know,
yeah, sure, of course they will ask this question, but in principle that's between you and the apartment owner or the building owner. Yeah. And as I said, it's impossible to solve all the problems with any charger on the market, but we try to solve as much problems as possible. And especially when you go like here, of course, in Germany and more west, you can say, why, all right, we'll connect it to the backend and everything will go electronically, and smart home is picking up a little bit, and smart grids and all this kind of things. But if you go more east, there are a lot of electricians who are still coming and writing those things on paper, right? So we wanted to solve all the problems for all the customers in principle.
And there's just such a perception. I mean, you're going to have, if you don't talk to the right person, they're not going to know if they can know if you're stealing electricity. If you talk to the right person, they'll know this is legit. Right. But it's a perception thing too. You know, like you were saying with the phones. We were giving someone a ride yesterday, and we were talking about charging the iPhone or the computer or something, because we have a plug in the car for that. And she was wondering, does it use much of the battery for the car? and I was like, well, how many batteries are in the Tesla? Like
7,000, right?
7,000 or something.
Yeah.
So we're like, no, there's like 7,000 laptop batteries in here. You don't have to worry about it. But then at the same time, if you're charging in a garage or someone's outlet or something, they get concerned that you're taking like hundreds of dollars worth of electricity, because they think of a gas pump, you know. So it's this, you know, Elon has talked about it before, how a lot of our thinking is by association. You know, we think about things by association. We link them to something else we understand, and that's how we think about them. So when we're linking them to either laptops or phones or gas pumps, we can get very confused ideas just naturally. But yeah.
I just wanted to, I mean, yes, associations is one thing, but I think we are still in a state where maybe 98% of people, they just don't know what electric cars are.
Right.
And the great thing about that is it will change so quickly. Like people will follow the trend, which they don't even realize today. I mean, it's same with electric cars, same with VR, and same with the other things. They will pick this technology because it's better. And many people today, that's what I always try to, when I read article on the internet about electric cars on some mainstream media, and then I go to comments and I see what people are writing there. I'm just amazed how unwell informed they are, and then, but it, many people, 90% of people, they don't realize that in 5 years they will be driving a completely different technology, but they still think today they will be driving a diesel or a gasoline car, which is, I think, not true. So they don't know what they will be driving in 5 years. They don't realize it, but they will be driving an electric car, for example. So that's the power of a change.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Martin has a question. How do you see the future with smart charging, having the car either driving or plugged in, and all the cars being grid stabilizing battery, being a grid, basically together forming a grid stabilizing battery? What do you see basically with all of these things?
So when I first came up with the idea of LeviAmp and Easy Charge, the grid stabilization. I mean, I'm a power trader. I traded electricity, and I was ramping up the power plants in Europe and Eastern Europe and Central Europe. So I know this topic, and I know how important it is, and I know how much money lies in the grid stabilization. But there are some regulations, and I think it will take us quite a lot of time until, first of all, the critical mass of cars will be reached. To have those virtual power plants, and virtual things to stabilize the grid, and second of all, until also the legislation will be adopted to this concept. But I'm absolutely sure that having a car as the stabilizer of the grid is essential. And again, my personal opinion is that we're not talking mainly about like a global stabilization, like we're talking about global warming, but I would go rather to a local use case, whereas in Japan, for example, South Korea, they have some electric cars. When electric cars are plugged in and the power goes off in the building due to emergency or earthquake or whatever it is, the cars will automatically power the whole building and provide this stabilization for the building or for the small region, but not like the whole thing. So decentralization, I think it's also coming, and I rather think in those small instances.
Yeah, and I think
combating the global warming in principle.
I think it was the Honda Fit EV, perhaps, that on the U.S. market doesn't have this capability, but in Japan it had this capability. So this market was, especially after what happened a few years ago, this market was very keen to provide this kind of backup solution for consumers.
Sure.
And consumers are
imagine
looking
hospital
for it.
And all that. Sure. It just makes it cheaper and easier to access the power, right? And then, of course, when you are able to do that for emergency, then you immediately switch to things like, okay, when the power is expensive, why don't we use electric cars, which we have in our garage, as the building owner, and just power the building from that, if the EV driver allows you to do that, right? And then our EV driver participates also on the profit of that. So that could be something which could come in the future, in my opinion.
So back to workplace charging. So can you say anything about how your experience with going to employers, large employers, and trying to sell them on? I assume you've done this, that you've gone to employers and tried to sell them on the idea of being ahead of the curve, providing a solution for their EV drivers. Can you share anything you learned from that, and any general response?
Absolutely. So I think there are two types of situations we encounter right now the most. One type is you come to a company and they say, brilliant, I mean, we'll just do it. We want to have 5 chargers for our guest parking places and then 10 chargers for employees, and we'll roll out a program inside the company which will allow our employees to buy electric cars or to lease electric cars, and everything will be great. So, and then then it's very easy deal in principle. And then you have those who you come and they say, oh, wait a second, we don't have any electric cars, so why do we bother? And in many cases, this setup in the company, within the company, is not ready to even offer electric cars for their employees. So there is no chance for an employee to lease a company car and have it a plug-in hybrid or full electric. if there is one unlucky employee who bought his car himself, or actually he's a lucky person, but he's unlucky in the company, then he has a bad luck. So, and I think there is this or that, and there is almost nothing in between.
And do you think it happens that some companies, if the right person or right few people got an EV and they're the right, and they advocate for EV, then they open a door, but basically you have to have the right kind of person who's willing to push, who's willing, who has influence, who's willing.
Yeah, I see you have some experience as well. It's exactly like that. I mean, it's
no, I'm just wondering. I'm assuming this is.
Yeah, you're assuming absolutely right. So it right now it's all depends on who you talk to and who's the facility manager, who owns or who operates the carpool of the cars. And you know, in principle, if I have to summarize that, it's still quite difficult, right? So it's not.
I would expect so. I would expect.
But it will change. I mean, I'm not worried at all. I know that, you know, it will change within a year and a half. And the reasons you described, and we all know, the cars are coming, the perception of people is changing. You see more and more articles about that, and people will be getting more educated about this topic. But right now, it's quite challenging.
Some people, a few, you know, you let the people nagging you maybe have more influence on you sometimes, but you know, some of them have been complaining about the Model 3 coverage, continual, you know, all types of Model 3 coverage that just keeps rolling out, but the point is, you know, there's 500,000 reservations for this car. All of a sudden, it's going to dramatically increase the electric car market and visibility in the next year, but even more so, next 3 to 5 years, it's going to be hugely dramatic change in the market because of this one model and other models that will be in a similar. But it's obviously got a lot more interest, and it's visible. It's very visibly. It is. I mean, it's going to catch. You know, just the Model S catches people all the time, looking at it, asking, "What's the brand?" And it's Tesla. It's like, yeah, but what's the brand? What's the company? It's like Tesla. You know, it's like, oh, but what is, you know, who makes it? It's like, yeah, Tesla. It's like, so you have this problem with the Model S, but I would say the Model 3 even looks more significantly different, where it's going to be something that's and especially in higher numbers. If people see several of them every day, they're going to wonder, what is this car? So it's going to change perception dramatically, and then that changes the people you're talking to, the garage owners, etc. But so then it comes back to changing society and changing lives. But with the, you know, so back to the, you know, you have right now, you know, like I said, my mom has a Nissan Leaf and no home charging, outside the norm for sure, for 2 years. In South Florida. I have a Model S with no home charging, but we use it for a shuttle service. So we put like 12,000 kilometers on it very quickly. So it's not the same story. But basically, even like today, you know, if you have the potential to go to a destination charger, a slow charger, and walk around the park, hang out at the park, or go shopping, this is one way to live without home charging. Otherwise,
I do it as well sometimes. I mean, I don't have my charger at home, but I have our charger at work, at the office. So that's what I.
Oh, so you don't have a home? I
don't have it at home. I mean, as I said, that's the discussion with the landlords, and it's still difficult, and the prices they wanted to have for, you know, to even allow that, just didn't make sense at all. I mean, they were just crazy, and that was one learning curve we had. But since I have chargers at work, and very close to where I live, there is a free solar powered public charger.
Nice.
I mean, I didn't have a need at all. I mean, just working charging is enough. Sometimes,
but that's basically, so you have people who just home charging it, and whatever networks we have right now probably covers it. Kyle, of course you need a long range EV, you know, for your needs in Southern California, and a lot of people will feel like one of their cars at least needs to be long range, for those trips to grandma and grandpa, for those, you know, whatever, soccer tournaments, whatever. But basically, home charging and the current network in a lot of places covers what someone with a Tesla Model 3 or next generation Nissan Leaf probably needs, right?
Right. I think for those long distance trips, I mean, the Tesla supercharging network today is sufficient. They've added capacity. So, I mean, do you remember the charger we were at when you were out here last year? It had 10 stations. Today it's got 18. So, I mean, they're already increasing capacity at a lot of their stations. And that network, I think, is more than sufficient for Tesla.
We should say the long range network, of course, for road trips is dramatically different from Tesla to not Tesla. Artur, of course, knows this as well with the Model S, but we have a story coming this weekend in coordination with Martin, who's on one of the attendees here, about this. But basically, we're talking for road trips, Tesla's got it covered. For road trips, no one else really seems to have it fully covered in all but a niche markets. But yeah, keep going.
Oh, I think Tesla is very well established in EV charging for long range trips. I think when you step anywhere outside of Tesla, whether it's the Leaf or CHAdeMO or CCS or the Chevy Bolt or the Hyundai Ioniq, they all run into that same issue of public charging just is not robust enough at the speeds they need for long distance trips. So there really is a pretty big gap for all other manufacturers today that aren't using that Tesla standard.
But then for regular use, not the road trips, it sounds like, Artur, you're saying in your situation, and I would assume in a lot of situations, if you have workplace charging, it's similar to having home charging. I mean, basically, you just need a few hours of charge every day.
Right.
So
you don't need the whole day, right?
And you don't even need that, to be honest. Yeah. So you've got a few hours parked at work. You've got many hours parked at work and at home. So as long as you have charging there, and it's reliable, that should cover all but road trips. Road trips is just a different beast. But for people who don't have neither, then you have to have a good network of destination chargers. So hotspot chargers, as PodPoint calls them, hotspots.
I think I wanted to touch on workplace charging a little. I think we talked a little bit about the grid and kind of vehicle to grid technology. I really see the grid as the driver for workplace charging. So if we think about the grid of the future, it's going to have a large component of solar generation, which creates a massive spike of generation during the day. So that'll quickly drive pricing negative in a lot of areas during the daytime. And that will quickly create a market where workplace charging, daytime charging is valuable. So not only will it be the cheapest time to charge your EV, it'll be almost providing a service to the grid in a lot of ways with that daytime demand. So I think that will create a lot of incentive models that will shift towards incentivizing workplace charging during the day. And that will be the time to charge your EV because it lines up with that solar production curve. And we're seeing that in California as our solar production increases to the point where it's causing a noticeable impact on the grid. So workplace charging, I think, will evolve and become a much larger component of charging, and we'll see charging shifting from the home to the workplace, and that'll just become something that'll be an expectation, not only at your workplace, but when you go look for a job, you're going to expect as a base condition that they will have that daytime workplace charging. So
yeah, I fully agree, and they call it the duck curve in the industry. But it's quite interesting that we would be shifting from early adopter phase of EVs with nighttime charging being the core charging time to this daytime charging being the core charging time as solar also ramps up and grows more and more. But like Artur was saying earlier, I think, if you ask someone today, they think their next car or their car 5 years from now will be diesel or gasoline, and all three of us, I think, believe it's going to most likely be electric for a lot of them. So it's a similar case probably with workplaces, I think. Right now it's a hard conversation to get workplaces, Artur, to get in the door and get them to say, yeah, we want your charging stations. In 5 years, it'll be obvious. If you have employees, you need to have EV charging for them, right? So it's going to become very much like this is first, something that progressive or forward-thinking companies do. Then it's going to be something that a lot of companies do. Then it's going to be something that's just like required. If you better offer EV charging, otherwise you're going to lose some potential employees. getting over to Martin. Martin's got a question if we have plans to cover the new Leaf event on September 5th. I mean, for sure, we're covering it. Happy it's going to be broadcast live. It would be great to have someone on the ground, but we don't have any plans for that right now. Yeah, we're very, I mean, I would say many of us are more excited about the next generation Leaf unveiling than we were the final unveiling of the Model 3, because, you know, we basically saw the Model 3 and knew what was coming. The Leaf, there's still a lot of question marks. There's a lot of interest in how far it goes. We also have a proposal for Nissan. Like I said, we'll get to that later in this week. Martin says, I think the same as solar midday charging will be for wind nighttime charging. Yeah, so I mean, basically, in a lot of markets, there's just you know, solar and wind coming on growing at the same time as electric car adoption is just a perfect match. I mean, it's just, they're going to soak up any extra electricity generation, especially as Martin highlighted with smart charging. If they're the cars don't have to be able to send electricity back to the grid. What's really, I think, most important and critical is that they be able to charge when there's high demand and not charge when there's low demand, and be smart about it. And as long as they're plugged in at work or at home for many hours, it's easy, right? Martin also says, I home charge all the time. In 12 months, I've used CHAdeMO and Type 2 chargers about 10 times. Do you think you're over-exaggerating the need for charging networks? Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you have home charging or workplace charging, I think that's what we're saying is there's very little need for other charging. What we're thinking about really is about the people who don't have home charging and might not have workplace charging. So as Artur, as you said, you know, you can go like a week without charging. So all you really need then is a shopping center to charge at for a few hours, or, you know, IKEA is good about putting in charging stations. Yep. Or a park where you would spend a few hours or something. So it's really about, I think it's going to be about this sort of, you know, the bulk of charging being done at home or work, a certain other segment, maybe 30% being done at these hotspot charging stations.
And I mean, look, when we talk to companies, they always ask us questions like, how fast charging do I need to put? Like, you know, and to be honest, not many companies, I mean, they don't do research up front, and so some of the companies, they think, well, we need to put as fast charging there at our facility as possible, and we tell them, look, that's not right, because why would you spend that money, unnecessary money, just putting faster chargers in place, whether the people will be just using them a few hours, and if they're anyhow standing there for 7 hours, it just doesn't make sense. But every business, like shopping mall, like parking garage, like IKEA, they definitely know what's the average standing time of the customer and how much time customer spends in their facilities. And based on that information, they should definitely think about choosing the right charging station for their needs. So if, you know, if IKEA has, I guess IKEA is longer than half an hour, but if IKEA would have, or if a supermarket with food will have a half an hour turnover of people, right, so that every person spends there on average 20 to 30 minutes, yeah, then maybe it makes sense for them to put fast charging, their DC charger there, and to allow people to charge it while they're shopping, and either make it as a paid service or as the premium service for their you know, card holders, whatever it is. If there is IKEA where people spend 5 hours, again, that maybe doesn't make sense to put their DC charging station. Maybe AC will be more than enough. So that should be also driven by the businesses, and they should think about it. And one thing what I would say, it's maybe a lot of companies who are right now not thinking about charging stations, and they think, okay, I will always be able to catch up when the market is coming. Yes, it's partially true, but those companies who are doing those pilot projects and who are actually putting those charging stations right now, they are having a tremendous valuable lessons, and they're already being prepared to, you know, vast adaptation of electric cars. So they know what the grid capacity is in their garage. They know what to do and how people are using them. They know how many chargers they will need later on. So when the time is coming, they are much better prepared, and in the end, it will be much cheaper for them to adopt it than to those who will start from scratch. Just my opinion. That's what we saw from our business day-to-day.
And depending on the market, I mean, they could really be getting more business. When we bought our places in this development, if they had an EV charging spot, I would have paid significantly more for that spot, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Because of the ease and convenience of knowing it's there. And that's what, even before I had a car. But going back to my city planning routes, you have I forget what it's called, but basically different needs have different scales of geography that they serve. So if you just look at the commercial sector, you have 7-Elevens serve a certain neighborhood market, IKEAs serve a regional market. So you have different zones, right? I would say we have this slow charging zones of home and workplace that are going to proliferate. Then you have this destination charging at shopping centers, etc. that are going to help supplement. And I would assume so far today, like 2 or 3% of charging is on fast chargers, and I'd assume that's going to hold pretty true. Where maybe it'll increase to 5% or something as more of the market comes without home or workplace charging. And then you would have maybe a fast charging station located about as frequently as an IKEA, or maybe more frequently, but you have basically a few in each corner of the city. And if I just think about my life, I'm lucky to have 22 kilowatt charging nearby, and that sort of covers it. But once in a while, it would be really nice to have if the fast CHAdeMO station was not on the other side of the city, if it was on this side of the city, or if the supercharger was not on the other side. Unfortunately, they're both on the other corners of the city, so there's little inconvenient to get to. But if you have like 4 corners of a city, for example, and you have 3 fast chargers at each corner, then it seems like that would cover the future pretty well. Just for normal needs, not road trips, of course.
Yeah, maybe I add one thing. Like, for sure, the day-to-day routine for people in the future when driving electric cars will change, and it doesn't mean that it's a bad change. Many people think like, oh my God, I'll need to think about it, and I mean, you're already thinking about when to go to gasoline station, and do that. So the same with the driving habit on the highways. Like stopping every 2 hours to charge for 10 minutes seems to be crazy for people who are driving 5 hours in a row with their diesel. But in the very end, it's a different style of driving. It's a different style of living.
It's healthier and it's recommended for safety.
Exactly, and I mean it's not bad. It's just different, and that's what people have to realize, that yes, your routine will change. You will adopt it, but in the very end, you will love it, because if you have at home charging, you will be fully charged every day. That's the luxury thing which no one has except those people who have the charging at home. If you have at work, you'll basically be charged every day if you need to, or whenever you need to, you'll have a charging there available for you. If you don't have either of those, you will have fast chargers nearby, and that will fill your need. You'll need to plan a bit, but that's normal. I don't think that anyone should be worried about and should have a fear of changing the habit. I think those habits will be better than they have there right now. That's
humans. For some reason, a lot of people have a difficulty thinking about change and changing habits. But speaking of habits, so very likely we are going to change our habits with how we get around. Where it's already happening to some extent with a lot of people using Uber instead of Uber or Lyft or something, instead of driving themselves places. But 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a dramatic difference in autonomous electric vehicles, taking us a lot more of the places we go than our own cars. I think there still will be considerable car ownership personally because of its status role and people treating it sort of as an extension of their home. And there's
maybe I challenge you here, but think about, I think in the cities, think about status. You can show status by being a part of a either Tesla network, or some will have Mercedes network, or you most probably you will not own the car in I don't know 10 years maybe, but your status will be shown by being a part of a certain network. I mean, if you are a network of leaves, autonomous leaves, sure.
Yeah, no, I think it's a big question mark. I mean, I lived for 13 years car free, and I used to work promoting bicycling and walking and using mass transit because of the convenience, health, cost, blah 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 benefits. There were a lot of benefits. So my hesitation with it is just I've seen surprisingly how much people are addicted to ownership, and I know we're in the sharing economy, but I'm curious how far it goes. But to some extent or another, we're going to have a lot more autonomous electric robo-taxis that are going to be driving people around, no matter what, I would say. And the question is, how then will the charging situation change? I mean, we then don't have to think about charging as a consumer. The fleet manager for the robo-taxis thinks about it.
Right.
So then how does it change? Do we have these parking pods where they just go and park and charge? Or
that's where we that's kind of a nightmare for us at Easy Charge. It's because we know that that situation is coming in 5-7 years, and in some markets, and that's why we even already did a feasibility study, and we already have our plans to make some autonomous plugging systems, either based on our LVM or based on something else. That's a very important part of the thing. And I love owning the car. Look, I own the car. So from the moment when I got my driver license, I own the car. And but still, I understand that for my kids, owning a car, I think, will be an obsolete thing. They will not need it. I don't even think they will need a driver license, to be honest.
Yeah. I had autopilot on yesterday, and my daughter was like watching it, and she was like, I was pretending it was like some kind of magic or something, but I said, well, you're never gonna have to learn to drive anyway. This will just be normal once you're old enough for a driver's license. But I agree. But I think, I mean, my what you see people talk about and how I think it would turn out is you'd have a handful of these park and charge spots in different areas in various areas of the city, where these robotaxis would just be able to go charge as they need and then go back out. So then you sort of, depending on how much we move into that type of transportation system, then all of this home charging and workplace charging, especially the slower charging, might just become of an obsolete factor. And again, then fast charging might gain importance, because for them, it's worth it to charge faster and get back on the road to pick up passengers if it's a fleet of robo-taxis or something. So it's, I don't know. But do you think, in 10 years, we'll look at all of these networks of charging infrastructure and think, oh, well, that was a funny time?
I think we definitely will, for especially level 2 chargers. I mean, I'm already seeing those with the longer range EVs. It just becomes a situation where it's not worth either the fight or the inconvenience of trying to find a station, and people are largely skipping those in a lot of situations. But yeah, the autonomous future is going to be crazy. There are so many variables, whether it's battery swapping, car sharing, mass transit, autonomous mass transit with large buses that just go around, like the Uber pool model, where you've got a medium-sized bus that can pick up people along a route. So I think there are a lot of exciting technologies that will dictate that autonomous future.
And I remember when I was there in town for the Model 3 unveiling, the first one, and you brought this up, and this is, I think, more or less the first time I heard this, where you said, I think all of these slow level 2 charging stations should just be given to the plug-in hybrids to use, and we should just move on to the next phase of faster charging. And like I said, I'm lucky that we have a few 22 kilowatt charging stations nearby. So that's sort of borderline fast charging in the US. And like the other day, I went to one that I thought was 22 kilowatts, and it was 7 kilowatts, and I was like, well, this is useless. This is just a pain in the butt.
Right.
And I mean, and of course, 3-4 kilowatt is like really like, is it worth plugging in? Even 7 kilowatt, I think I would be at a point. I'm at a point right now with the Model S where I would question if it's worth plugging into a 7 kilowatt charger. For me, it's more useful just go to a 22 kilowatt for a few hours, do some work while I'm there, and leave once a week. You know, if it wasn't a shuttle service, of course, where you have to charge even more. But basically, yeah, I would see it evolving to that. If you have a car, you just yeah, I mean, especially for robo-taxis though, where they want to get back out on the road, and for people who don't have home or workplace charging, you know, I would go 15 minutes further probably to get to a fast charger.
Yeah.
And then just go
Sure,
back.
exactly. Same experience.
Well, we have two questions, and then we'll wrap up. So Martin Lacey, a few years ago, California had loads of paddle chargers, which had to be changed out for CHAdeMO and then upgraded to include CCS. Tesla have their own proprietary charging system, or as Martin has highlighted, it's not proprietary. It's it's only available for people who can charge on it, but yeah, it's a complicated discussion there. We're beginning to see consolidation among charging providers. Are we on the cusp of one international charging standard as the market continues to mature? I would say no. I think it's just always going to be a mixture, but and all stations will have, most stations will have all of them available. But Kyle,
I mean, I'm still amazed why bigger car manufacturers. I mean, I guess we all know the answer, but why they're not working with Tesla, for example, because that it seems to be a so low-hanging fruit for a car manufacturer to just go and and make a deal with Tesla and allow their car to use the charging infrastructure of Tesla and superchargers, because by doing so, they will be immediately market leader among all other car manufacturers in EV driving. Because no matter what car you are creating, and no matter what car is in the concept of any car manufacturer, if there is no charging stations for long distance driving, it's useless. It's just
so insane to me. It's so insane because, like you said, they all of a sudden their car becomes that much more. I mean, all of a sudden it becomes I mean, people complain about Tesla getting so much attention, but it's actually fully practical, more or less, especially as they triple the supercharger network. Other cars, it's a whole nother level, and all of a sudden Nissan or Renault or someone could have electric car with long range that can go on road trips.
Absolutely.
The amount of pride they must have to not do it. I've seen one person commented that, but Tesla controls the network, and then they can change the rules, the pricing, etc., and then you're at the whim of Tesla. But for the short-term period of 3 to 5 years at least, it makes a ton of sense. Absolutely. And as I've always said, Tesla is the coolest kid on the block. If you're best friends with Tesla, all of a sudden you're a lot cooler too. Your brand value goes through, Volvo.
And I mean, Elon openly said, "I'm willing to cooperate." No one asks me to do that, and that's even more insane for me. If he would, he's openly admitting that, yeah, sure, come to me, we'll talk and we'll do that. No props. You just pay the fair price for, the fair share for usage, and that's it. That's a killer deal for me. I mean, if I'd be a CEO of any auto company and planning to do any EV, long-range EV, that would be the first thing I'd do. But maybe there is a hidden reason we don't know why they're not doing it yet.
So sorry, Kyle.
I would say I think the market will dictate the charging standard and which one will take the cake on that. I mean, it kind of balances both of Martin's questions where I don't think those long-range public charging stations are required. I don't think they're going to make or break the case for the day-to-day usage, but they are a big part of driving for a lot of people, and we're in that household. We're in that case, my household, where they are very important. I would love to see the market consolidate around Tesla, and I think they will come out in the long run with public charging being a strategic advantage. So I think the market will dictate that in a lot of ways, where people are going to naturally gravitate towards Teslas in this case. But I think, like you said, Zach, I mean, other manufacturers that get on board with that standard, obviously we're pushing for that because the network is there, it's established. And I've heard many times that any other manufacturer could catch up. It's just a matter of spending the money. And I agree, but they're not doing it. And so it's so easy to just say, get on board with Tesla. adopt the standard. I'm fine with any standard. I think it would really help adoption to have a single international standard, but we're just not there yet.
And I know networks like Fastnet in the Netherlands, Greenway in Slovakia and Poland they're building stations that can go 150 kilowatt charging, and I think they'll try to lead the way for people in those regions. We're making their Nissans or BMWs or whatever practical. But it's still like, across a continent or across the United States, you have, these networks. There are no networks that broad. Of course, there's a consortium in Europe, but it's unclear how fast it's moving to do anything. Haven't heard much positive sign of fast movement. But the other challenge, 150 kilowatt charging station, as Artur, I think, hinted earlier, it's probably it's not going to pay off in many cases, or it's not going to pay off for a long time in many cases. So for a charging company to come in and try to make money on this is a big challenge. Even these 50 kilowatt charging stations cost way more than they make in many years. So then you have a question of, is it really an outside industry's role to supply this, or should the automakers understand that this is part of the car? And as you said, Kyle, it's part of the EV ecosystem, and they have to provide that part of the EV ecosystem to be competitive, to be relevant. And
I think I'll tell an open secret, but maybe I'm just disclosing someone's business model. But right now, the business model of building fast chargers is, look, let's take the hottest spots on the highways or anywhere we think, and then after we take several thousands of those spots, we sell our network as the whole to someone. Either it's an automaker or city or whoever it is, or private investor. So I think right now they are not in the phase of earning money on chargers, but building the network in the right spots. Several companies are doing that in Europe, also in US, and I think that will have a value. How big the value will be, and how the monetization will look like, that's a big question. But the business model right now is to let's log the spots and see what happens. And that's where a lot of investors.
See them. It's basically how long they can bring in investment to keep afloat as they try to do this. But you see, even ChargePoint already has investment from Daimler.
Exactly. They are ready to roll out in Europe, and we are also thinking about that with our Levium Tech, right? With a projector and advertisement, because waiting for companies to buy our chargers and to advertise. Yes, some are interested, but that's not a majority. Bringing them those chargers for free or for a huge discount and having those spots and then monetizing those spots in the future, that's what I think we're going for.
I love that projector thing. When that came out, I was like, oh no, that is really that's the key biggie there. But of course, the convenience of charging with your system is great. But I was like, this opens up a whole new.
Exactly. The charging will be actually the secondary thing for us.
Yeah.
It will be just a cool thing to have, right? You can have a charger, you can use it, you might not. It doesn't matter. For us, it will have a small effect.
So the last comment from Martin was the car sharing in Amsterdam gives a discount to users who plug in after using the car.
Great example.
In the world of big data, Internet of Things, we're going to have this more and more where the systems are just smart based on, if you
Same Tesla punishing people who are parking in superchargers for more than an hour or two just because they can. So that's
exactly
the beauty of economy and incentivization.
Yeah, the technology is allowing all of this now, and it's just a matter of maturing and implementing. But well, thanks a lot. There's, I'm sure, a lot more we didn't talk about with charging the city, but thanks to Martin and two Martins actually. I realized they have different spelling, but it's pronounced the same or very similar. But thanks for them for chiming in as well. And by the way, we did go live on Facebook early on, so we've been on Facebook, and it'll be on our Facebook videos section immediately afterward, basically. But thank you all, and I'm sure in a few years we'll talk about these things again, or still be talking about them, and we'll have more clarity. But,
thanks. It was a big pleasure joining you guys.
Yeah, thanks. This is great.
Right.
It takes a minute to find the end meeting, but yeah, okay, I got it.
Everything will be great.
Yeah,
Electric cars are coming whether the chargers are there or not.
Exactly. For a long time there was this chicken and egg debate, and I think it's just clear now they're coming, so you better all just get out there. Whether it's charging or cars, you better get your product on the market quick, because
exactly
there's a lot of eggs hatching already. But yeah, check in next week to get your electric fix, and of course check in every day on CleanTechnica for clean tech news. But this weekend, watch out, we have an article coming that covers what we've been talking about with super fast charging across the world. Yep. Cheers.
Thanks.